No, I look forward to that with great anticipation. I'm looking forward to seeing God face to face.
Billy Graham was known for many things: unwavering faith, moral clarity, and a rare willingness to speak honestly, even when his words made people uncomfortable. For decades, he stood at the center of global Christianity, respected by millions across denominations. But near the end of his life, Billy Graham quietly confirmed a truth about the Pope that stunned many who heard it. This wasn't a public confrontation. There were no fiery sermons or dramatic press conferences. Instead, it came through calm reflection, words spoken with the weight of a lifetime spent studying faith, leadership, and spiritual authority. What Graham acknowledged challenged long-held assumptions and sparked intense discussion among believers around the world. For years, people speculated about Billy Graham's private views on the Vatican, the Pope's role in global Christianity, and the future of the Church. Graham rarely addressed these topics directly, choosing unity over controversy. But before his death, he made it clear where he truly stood and why he believed honesty mattered more than silence. Those close to him say this confirmation wasn't meant to divide, but to clarify. It reflected deep respect for faith itself, while also raising questions many were afraid to ask. Questions about doctrine, leadership, and what it truly means to guide millions spiritually. Once you hear what Billy Graham confirmed and why he waited so long to say it, you'll understand why these words still echo today. Long after his passing, Billy Graham spent his entire life walking a careful line between conviction and compassion. As one of the most influential Christian leaders of the modern era, he understood the power of words and the damage they could cause if spoken without wisdom. That understanding shaped how he addressed controversial topics, especially those involving divisions within Christianity. Few subjects required more caution than the role of the Pope and the Catholic Church. For decades, Billy Graham was often asked where he stood on Catholic leadership. The questions came from all sides: supporters, critics, journalists, and fellow religious figures. Yet, time and again, he chose restraint. Rather than fueling theological disputes, Graham focused on what he believed united believers rather than what separated them. His mission, as he often explained, was to bring people closer to faith, not to deepen existing divides. This silence, however, was often misunderstood. Some assumed it meant agreement. Others believed it signaled quiet opposition. In reality, Graham's approach was shaped by experience. He had witnessed how public disagreements between religious leaders could fracture communities, distract from spiritual purpose, and harden hearts. For him, unity was not weakness. It was responsibility. Privately, Billy Graham studied deeply. He was known for thoughtful reflection, theological reading, and long conversations with leaders from different Christian traditions. He believed understanding mattered more than assumption. And while he avoided public confrontation, that did not mean he lacked personal convictions. As he grew older, Graham became increasingly reflective about legacy, not his own, but the legacy of faith itself. He understood that future generations would face new challenges, new interpretations, and new questions about authority and leadership. The role of the Pope, particularly in a rapidly changing world, became one of those questions. Those close to Graham say that toward the end of his life, he felt a quiet responsibility to clarify certain beliefs, not loudly, not divisively, but honestly. His health was declining. His public appearances had ended. And with that distance from the spotlight came freedom. Freedom to speak without worrying how headlines would frame his words. What makes this moment significant is not what Graham said publicly during his career, but what he chose to acknowledge privately near the end. His reflections were calm, measured, and deeply rooted in Scripture. They were not attacks. They were not endorsements. They were clarifications. He spoke about the importance of spiritual leadership being grounded in humility, service, and accountability. He emphasized that no single figure should ever eclipse faith itself. These ideas were not new to Graham, but the context in which he discussed them carried new weight, especially when applied to global religious leadership. Importantly, Graham did not frame his thoughts as a verdict on any individual. Instead, he focused on the structure of belief, the responsibility of influence, and the danger of placing spiritual authority above personal faith. These reflections resonated with many who later learned of them, because they reflected concerns believers across denominations quietly held. What Graham confirmed was not meant to shock. It was meant to clarify how he personally understood faith, leadership, and unity. And he chose to do so without condemnation, without drama, and without inviting conflict. This careful approach explains why these words did not dominate headlines at the time, yet continue to be discussed today. They carry the weight of a man who spent a lifetime choosing restraint, and who finally spoke when he believed silence was no longer helpful. We'll explore what Billy Graham actually confirmed, why it mattered to him personally, and how his words were shaped by decades of spiritual leadership rather than momentary controversy. What Billy Graham confirmed before his death was not a dramatic accusation or a theological attack. Instead, it was a deeply considered truth about how he viewed spiritual authority, including the role of the Pope within Christianity. For Graham, this truth had less to do with any one person and more to do with how faith should function. In the lives of believers, Graham acknowledged that while the Pope holds immense influence and symbolic leadership for millions, no single human figure should ever be seen as standing between an individual and their personal relationship with faith. This idea had always been central to Graham's beliefs, but near the end of his life, he felt it was important to say it clearly, without ambiguity. He emphasized that faith, in his view, must remain direct, personal, and grounded in Scripture rather than hierarchy. Leadership could guide, teach, and inspire, but it should never replace individual responsibility and belief. This was the truth Graham confirmed, not as a criticism, but as a conviction shaped by decades of ministry. What made this confirmation notable was the timing. Graham waited until his final years, when he was no longer actively preaching to massive crowds, no longer managing a global ministry, and no longer navigating the pressures of interfaith diplomacy. With distance from public life came clarity. He no longer felt obligated to soften certain beliefs for the sake of public harmony. Those who heard these reflections say Graham spoke with respect, even admiration for the Pope's global reach and humanitarian influence. He did not deny the positive impact the Vatican had made in areas like peace efforts, charity, and moral guidance. But he drew a firm line between respect for leadership and spiritual dependence. This distinction mattered deeply to Graham. He had spent his life encouraging people to seek faith personally, not through institutions alone. In his mind, confusion between leadership and salvation risked weakening the very foundation of belief. That concern, he felt, was worth acknowledging even late in life. Another important aspect of Graham's confirmation was what he did not say. He did not declare anyone wrong. He did not predict conflict. He did not suggest division was inevitable. Instead, he framed his thoughts as guidance, a reminder that faith must always point inward before it points upward toward. Leadership structures. This approach explains why his words were not widely publicized at the time. They lacked controversy by design. Graham was not interested in being remembered for provoking debate. He wanted to be remembered for clarity, humility, and consistency. Yet over time, as people revisited his final reflections, the significance became clearer. In a world where religious authority often intersects with politics, culture, and power, Graham's confirmation felt quietly bold. He reaffirmed a belief many held privately, but rarely articulated openly. It also revealed something personal about Graham himself. Near the end, he was less concerned with how his words would be interpreted and more concerned with whether they reflected his lifelong convictions. That honesty, stripped of public performance, gave his confirmation lasting weight. Ultimately, what Billy Graham confirmed was not meant to change institutions. It was meant to remind individuals where faith truly begins. And in doing so, he left behind a message that continues to resonate across denominations, generations, and belief systems. We'll explore how these words were received, why some reactions were unexpectedly emotional, and why Graham's silence for so many years suddenly made sense to those closest to him. When Billy Graham's final reflections began quietly circulating among those close to him, the reaction was far more emotional than controversial. That alone surprised many. After all, Graham had not introduced new doctrine or launched an attack on any institution. Yet his words struck a deep chord because they came from a man known for choosing silence over division for most of his life. For longtime followers, the confirmation felt like closure. Many had wondered for years where Graham truly stood on questions of religious authority and leadership. His careful neutrality had often left room for speculation. Hearing him finally articulate his belief, calmly, respectfully, and without pressure, gave clarity to questions that had lingered for decades. Among Protestant communities, his words were received as a reaffirmation of principles they already associated with Graham. But what made the moment powerful was the tone. There was no triumph, no sense of being right. Instead, there was humility, the humility of a man who understood that faith evolves through reflection, not confrontation. Interestingly, some of the most emotional responses came from Catholics who respected Graham deeply. Many acknowledged that while they did not agree with every aspect of his belief, they recognized the sincerity behind his words. Graham's refusal to dismiss or diminish others' faith made his confirmation easier to receive, even when it challenged existing perspectives. Religious scholars later noted that Graham's timing played a significant role in the reaction. Had these words been spoken earlier in his career, they might have sparked heated debate. But coming at the end of his life, they were interpreted as wisdom rather than warning, the reflections of someone no longer seeking influence. But understanding there was also a personal dimension to the reaction. Those who knew Graham well said he had wrestled internally with the responsibility of influence for many years. He understood how easily spiritual leadership could be misunderstood, misused, or overvalued. His confirmation reflected not frustration, but concern for believers, who might confuse guidance with dependence. Some listeners described feeling unexpectedly emotional because Graham's words felt intimate. They were not delivered from a pulpit, not amplified by crowds, not polished for broadcast. They sounded like something a mentor would say quietly at the end of a long journey. Advice offered not to persuade, but to prepare others for the future. Media coverage remained limited, and that was intentional. Graham's family and associates did not push these reflections into headlines. They believed the message was for those willing to listen, not for sensational debate. This restraint mirrored Graham's own approach throughout his life. Over time, however, the emotional impact grew rather than faded. As global conversations about faith, authority, and leadership intensified, people returned to Graham's final words with new understanding. His confirmation felt increasingly relevant in a world where belief systems were often shaped by personalities rather than principles. Perhaps the most telling reaction came from those who had long criticized Graham for being too cautious. Even some of them admitted that his silence now made sense. He had waited until the moment when his words could be heard without the noise of ambition or expectation. In the end, the emotional response wasn't about disagreement or agreement. It was about trust. People trusted Billy Graham, and when someone that trusted speaks honestly at the end of their life, their words carry a weight that arguments never can. We'll explore why Graham may have intentionally left certain things unsaid, what that restraint reveals about his character, and how his final confirmation fits into the legacy he left behind. As meaningful as Billy Graham's final confirmation was, what stands out just as powerfully is what he deliberately chose not to say. In an era where opinions are often loud, absolute, and confrontational, Graham's restraint became part of the message itself. His silence on certain specifics was not avoidance, it was intention. Graham did not name individuals. He did not criticize doctrines point by point. He did not compare belief systems or rank spiritual authority. For a man who had spent decades answering difficult questions, this omission was striking. Yet those who knew him understood exactly why he chose this path. Throughout his life, Graham believed that faith conversations should draw people closer to reflection, not force them into defensive positions. He worried that direct attacks on institutions or leaders would overshadow the core of belief, personal responsibility, humility, and spiritual sincerity. By leaving details unsaid, he allowed listeners to examine their own understanding rather than react emotionally. This approach reflected Graham's deep awareness of influence. He knew his words carried weight far beyond their intent. A single sentence could be misused, exaggerated, or weaponized. In his final years, he became even more protective of how his legacy might affect others. His goal was not to create division, but to encourage clarity. By focusing on principles instead of personalities. Graham ensured that his message would outlive any momentary controversy. His confirmation was not tied to a specific pope or era. It applied broadly to leadership in any spiritual context. This universality is why his words continue to resonate long after his passing. There was also humility in his restraint. Graham never claimed complete understanding. He did not present himself as the ultimate authority on faith. Instead, he framed his views as personal convictions shaped by experience, scripture, and reflection. That humility made his message harder to dismiss and easier to respect. Some critics wanted more clear declarations, stronger language, firmer conclusions. But Graham was not interested in satisfying critics. He was interested in being faithful to his conscience. To him, saying less but meaning more was a form of honesty. In the broader context of his legacy, this final confirmation fits seamlessly. Billy Graham will be remembered not for controversy but for consistency. His message never changed. Faith is personal, leadership is a responsibility, and humility matters more than authority. By leaving certain things unsaid, Graham trusted his audience. He trusted them to think, reflect, and decide for themselves. That trust may be his most enduring contribution. In a world eager for answers, he offered something rarer: perspective. Ultimately, Billy Graham's final words about the Pope were not meant to close a debate. They were meant to open a conversation within the heart of each believer. And perhaps that is why they still matter today. Because sometimes the strongest truths are not shouted, they are quietly confirmed.